When I first saw this Gorillaz iceberg on Reddit, I was immediately fascinated by it. I thought I could make a video or even a series of videos covering all 6 layers of the iceberg. It would give me something to talk about, something to post for the foreseeable future, and I thought all in all the series would maybe take me about a month. That was 5 months ago, but we finally arrived at the 4th and final part of the ultimate Gorillaz iceberg. Now before we get started, I just have one little announcement, kind of a housekeeping thing if you will. I just wanted to say that we recently hit 1,000 subscribers! I'm so happy. I literally never thought this would happen. I promise my next video after this one is going to be a 1,000 subscribers special. I got a special little treat for you guys, unless of course you're not subscribed, in which case, f*** you. I'm just kidding. And with that out of the way, we can finally get into layers 5 and 6 of the ultimate Gorillaz iceberg. So grab a snack, grab a drink, get cozy, because this is probably going to take me like a million years. Starting things off with the first entry of layer 5, Tim and Eric lost interview. So if you're unfamiliar, Tim and Eric are a comedy duo from Pennsylvania. When they first started out, their work was recognized by Bob Odenkirk, of all people, and they worked with him to produce a show for Adult Swim called Tom Goes to the Mayor. And on this show, in 2005, they interviewed Gorillaz. Unfortunately, the entire interview has been lost except for this screen cap. All on the Board. All on the Board are a duo of poets, Jeremy Chopra and Ian Redpath, who write poems on boards across the London Underground. Now, Gorillaz have played 2 shows at the O2 in London, one in 2017 and one in 2021, and both times All on the Board wrote a poem for them, incorporating lyrics and titles from all their biggest hits. Demon Lamp. So this was a demon lamp that was actually animation director James Corr's idea. Jamie loved it and created the company Zombie Lighting to produce the lamp. It was intended for children, which I think is actually kind of interesting, because if I were a parent and say I had a kid who was afraid of the dark, I don't know if my solution to that would be to buy them a nightlight shaped like a demon. It came in 2 colors, red and a limited edition white, and it was brought back for Song Machine Live, which I think is pretty cute. Damon's. So in this video that I actually couldn't really find the origin of, I read that it was originally uploaded by Missy, Damon's daughter, but I found it on the Damon Albarn unofficial YouTube channel. Anyways, it's a video of Damon at work, and in one scene he's in his kitchen making a cup of tea, and in his kitchen in the background you can see a plate with a on it. I think the reason this is so low down on the iceberg is because it was a controversy, but a very minor one. It was mostly people on Tumblr kind of questioning whether or not this made Damon a Nazi. And look, I'm gonna try not to insert my own opinion too much in this video, but I just want to say that the idea of Damon being a Nazi runs so counter to pretty much everything that we know about him. It's also worth noting that this was used by Hindu and Buddhist cultures as a symbol of good fortune and prosperity for much longer than it was kind of co-opted and turned into a symbol of hate by the Nazi Party. It's also worth noting that there's a pretty important visual distinction between the Nazi and what I like to call the original. If you'll notice, the Nazi is tilted in a way that it's resting on its corner, whereas the original is resting on its side, and the one on Damon's plate in his kitchen was the original, which again is not a symbol of hate or anything negative at all. So basically the TLDR version, or I guess TLDL for too long didn't listen. Anyways, the short of it is that this was a pretty minor controversy in which people noticed Damon had a plate with a on it, even though the on the plate is really not a symbol of hate. Good luck to future Sahana, who has to censor that entire entry. Congrats on being a YouTube partner. Yay, censorship. Russell's side. So during the rollout for Plastic Beach, Gorillaz released idents of Russell, 2D, and Murdoch, kind of catching you up on where they had been between phases 2 and 3 and what they were up to now. And Russell's ident featured him stomping down a dock and jumping into the sea in a way that was framed as though he was committing suicide. Of course, we now know that he was simply searching for Noodle out in the ocean, but we didn't have that context at the time. Along with this ident came a note describing Russell's plan to search for Noodle, but again at the time it appeared to be a side note. Monkey tennis articles. Okay, this is probably going to be the most long-winded and confusing entry in this entire iceberg, so I'm going to really need you to stick with me here. I'm going to start by naming the major players in this story. We have Jamie Hewlett and Damon Albarn, who we all know by now, I hope. Kevin Saunders, who from what I understand works in copywriting and screenwriting, and Kevin's anonymous friend, who we'll call Nani, because he's anonymous. So in the early aughts, Kevin accused both Damon and Jamie of stealing Nani's idea for a multimedia project called Monkey Tennis, named after a joke from I'm Alan Partridge. When I say multimedia project, I mean that this was not a virtual band specifically, but a project mostly represented by a TV series, ringtones, and a video game. Allegedly, Nani came up with this idea in the 90s along with Kevin, who wrote descriptions of the characters Nani came up with. Jamie was brought on board to draw illustrations of these characters. However, after Jamie did these designs, Gorillaz popped up on the scene. Seeing similarities between Monkey Tennis and Gorillaz, Nani sued Jamie, not for copyright infringement or for stealing the idea of a virtual band, but for breach of confidence, which is profiting off of something that you were told in confidence. Because Nani was running out of funds to keep the lawsuit going, a settlement was reached in which Jamie paid Nani an undisclosed sum of money. This settlement also forbade Jamie and Nani from ever speaking about Monkey Tennis, so we'll probably only ever have Kevin's word on what happened, unless I guess Damon decides to talk about it, although I cannot possibly imagine him giving a single shit about any of this. This entire situation was even parodied in Rise of the Ogre, in which a group called Doppelganger sued Gorillaz for ripping them off. Since then, there's been kind of a debate, if you could even call it that, over whether or not Gorillaz themselves are the doppelgangers, and whether or not Gorillaz is a stolen idea. It's worth noting that Jamie has drawn up ideas for virtual bands that predate Gorillaz and even Monkey Tennis. Finally, the reason this entry is called Monkey Tennis Articles is because Monkey Tennis was the subject of articles in both the Face and Sunday Times back when it was still a developing idea. In my dreams. I can't sing. I don't know why I tried that. So this entry is an exciting one for me because it has to do with Kali Uchis, who is one of my favorite singers and my all-time favorite Gorillaz collaborator. So you guys probably already know that Kali featured on the songs She's My Caller and Ticker Tape on the album Humans. And during these recording sessions, she and Damon ended up with a bunch of unused demos. And one of these demos ended up as the song In My Dreams on Kali's own album Isolation in 2018. Damon features on the song and is also credited as producer. He's not credited as 2D, which makes me really sad, but that's besides the point. If you haven't listened to the song, I would definitely recommend it because the sound of it is very Gorillaz. You can definitely tell it was an unused track from Phase 4. Also, side note, but I feel like there's probably maybe 1.5 people in the audience that will relate to this. When I saw the track list for Isolation back when the album was first being announced, I saw the title In My Dreams and I got super excited because on her debut mixtape Drunken Babble, there's a song simply titled Dream. And when I saw the title In My Dreams, I got super excited because I thought it would maybe be a rework of Dream, kind of like in the same way Angel is a rework of Pablo Escobar, right? And when I found out that Damon was going to be featured on the track, I was even more excited because obviously I love him, and I was kind of disappointed when I found out that wasn't the case, but it's still a good song and you should listen to it. GR3G. So in a game featured on the Kong Studios website around 2003, a team of police were investigating the odd goings-on at Kong Studios. In this game, you would play as a bomb disposal robot named GR3GTR4K, and you explore different areas of the studios, such as the bowling alley, shooting range, cinema, bathroom, and lobby. Unfortunately, most of the game has been lost, but Gorillaz Rarities actually made a reconstruction. However, the bathroom and the shooting range still remain missing, and the reconstruction ran on Flash, so it's going to be a whole lot harder to find now. Oh, it's supposed to be like Greg. Confederate flag. So before the music video for Dare was released, an unfinished version was leaked online. Now you may be familiar with the final scene of the music video in which Murdoch wakes up from a nightmare, but what you may not be familiar with is the fact that in the background you can see a flag with a skull and crossbones on it. Well, in the unfinished version of the video that was leaked, the skull and crossbones flag was a Confederate flag. A similar incident happened with the G-Bite fancy dress, in which the swastika on Murdoch's outfit was changed to a smiley face in the final version. Chat-O-Matic. So on the Phase 1 Kong Studios website, there was a feature in Noodle's room called Chat-O-Matic. It was basically like an online forum where fans could get on and talk to each other, and you could choose your avatar from characters from Fu Action and the 16s, which was another project of Jamie Hewlett's. Not to be confused with the 16, who featured on the Good, the Bad, and the Queen track Herculean, which we all know and love, right? Right? Sometimes the band members themselves would even get on and talk to fans, and you would always know it was them because they were the only ones with actual Gorillaz avatar. If you remember the Phase 1 suicide prevention event that I talked about in the last part of the Iceberg, in which Jamie Hewlett as Murdoch had to talk a fan out of suicide, I'm pretty sure this is where that happened. Earl Zinger. So Earl Zinger is actually a singer that was considered to be the original singing voice of 2D before Damon decided to just do it himself. Remember, the original intention behind the band was that Jamie and Damon would remain anonymous, which is why they briefly considered having another person do the singing voice for 2D. Google Maps. So what I'm pretty sure this entry is referring to is that back during Phase 3, there was a pretty fun Gorillaz-related Easter egg on Google Maps. So if you typed in the exact coordinates that Murdoch listed as being the coordinates of Plastic Beach in his pirate radio broadcasts, it would pull up pictures of the island as though it were a real place, which I think is pretty fun. I wish they would do more stuff like that. Zombie Kong. So this was basically a Donkey Kong style platform game that was playable on the TV channel Play Jam, I guess. There was also a version of it online, but again, it was playable with Flash, so good luck with trying to play it now, I guess. Did you guys hear that? That was my shoulder. 2020 calendar. This one is pretty self-explanatory. It was a calendar that Gorillaz released in 2020, and each month featured a different piece of artwork from the band. It's, again, pretty self-explanatory. I'm not really sure what the purpose of this was, though. I mean, I know the purpose, it was to make money, but I don't really know why or what this has to do with anything. Webby speech. So back in 2006, Gorillaz won a Webby, and the acceptance speech was given by the 2D and Murdoch puppets. Also, this is just a question for the audience. Does anybody know where those puppets are right now? Are they sitting in a warehouse? Does somebody related to the band have them? Were they thrown out if they just deteriorated after sitting around for so many years? Does anybody know where they are? And if so, would you be willing to sell them? I would like to have them for personal reasons. Feel Dank Inc. Okay, this is another exciting one for me because I don't think I've mentioned this before on my channel, but one of my favorite genres of YouTube video is that of the mashup. There is something so magical to me about taking two songs that you never think would go together, like I Write Sins Not Tragedies and the theme song from Thomas the Train, or All Star and On Melancholy Hill, and putting them together in a way that's so good. I don't know what it is, I just eat that shit up every time. And one of my favorite mashup makers on YouTube is a user called Chris Kogos. And Chris Kogos made a version of Feel Good Inc. using entirely meme sounds, which is incredible. You can tell that there was a lot of dedication and effort put into it, and it was even featured on the official Gorillaz YouTube page under their covers playlist. So yeah, shout out to Chris Kogos, for real. Also, I wasn't kidding about that Thomas the Train thing. It is real and it is awesome. Okay, I'll be so honest, I've done 3 takes of this one entry alone, and I cannot say this title without sounding like a fool. So this was a set of lyrics with no accompanying audio that just ended up on the internet somehow. Obviously, this kind of goes without saying, but the song doesn't exist. It was posted as a joke. That's really it. La Cigale 2D. So in 2001, Gorillaz played the second show of their first ever tour at La Cigale in Paris, France. I don't know if you guys are super familiar with the way Gorillaz live shows used to work, but when they first got their start, the band would be behind the screen rather than in front, and visuals of the characters would play for the crowd. And the voice actors for the characters actually featured very prominently. They would kind of pop in between songs and speak to the audience as though they were really there. And I don't really know what the situation behind this show was. I don't know if maybe they hadn't found a voice actor for 2D, they hadn't hired Nelson yet, or maybe he hadn't recorded his lines in time, or he wasn't available for whatever reason. But what had happened was Damon had to do the voice for 2D all by himself, and it's so funny because he sounds like a fucking Muppet. Phase 2 interview kit. So this was a kit for interviewers who were planning on interviewing the band around the Demon Days Phase 2 era. It was basically just a few animated clips of the characters giving pretty generic responses that you could kind of fit around any potential question you were going to ask them. Under a hail of plastic bullets. So I briefly mentioned this in a previous part of the Iceberg. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3, but let me give you the very short synopsis. So during Phase 3, there was supposed to be a real honest-to-God book published called The Book of Man that would kind of reveal to the Gorillaz fan base that Murdoch was an immortal being who had been around since the beginning of time and was responsible for several major events throughout human history. The book would lead up to the present day and the events that were currently transpiring on Plastic Beach. Under a Hail of Plastic Bullets was meant to be a sequel to that book, and the plot of the book was basically that Plastic Beach was acting as the plug for a giant drain in the middle of the ocean, and when the island was destroyed, everything in the entire world, I guess, would get sucked down the drain with it, causing the end of the world as we know it, and presumably also the end of the band. Cass Brown was set to write these books, which obviously never came to fruition, but last I heard he still has the drafts for them, which I think would be pretty interesting to see. It's genuinely so hard to recount all of this without getting excited and tripping over my words because dude, Plastic Beach era had just so much missed potential because of, budget cuts and falling outs and mismanagement and just all of this stuff. It could have been perfect. And it makes me so sad that it wasn't. I've said this before. I think it's a hot take, but I still stand by it. I think I would rather live in an alternate universe in which Gorillaz were able to give the Plastic Beach arc a satisfying ending and then never made music again. Humans, Song Machine, The Now Now, Cracker Island, I would be okay if all of those just didn't exist and we just had a trilogy of albums and a kick story to go with them. Can I say ass? I'm just gonna stay on the safe side and say no, I can't. Icon Energy Drink. So back in Phase 2, as part of a partnership with Icon Magazine, Gorillaz sold an energy drink. And I don't know why this bothers me so much, but I cannot for the life of me find what this drink actually tasted like. I mean, knowing the band, it probably tasted like cigarettes and pickle juice, but I'm so curious. See, this is the problem. I've literally been a Gorillaz fan for, I don't know, maybe 15 years, but because I was such a little kid when the band was kind of at their peak, or at least what I consider to be their peak, I missed out on all this cool stuff. I couldn't even play the game on the website because my mom was convinced the Gorillaz were a bad influence. I think she was right. Mensch EP. So you may remember the Space Monkeys who remixed the entire Gorillaz debut album. Well, one of the only other pieces of work that they did was remixing a single called Mensch from the German artist Herbert Grönemeyer. We're just gonna take the L on that one and move on. Slow country music video. Okay, so when I first saw this entry, I was kind of thinking that, oh, Slow Country was originally considered to be one of the singles off their debut album, so I'm sure there was some kind of music video planned or in development that ended up being scrapped when Slow Country wasn't chosen as a single. But I don't think that's the case. At least I couldn't find anything on that. Like, all I could find was this fan-made video from a guy named Blake that was posted 13 years ago. I watched it. It was pretty good. I feel like the comments were kind of hating on him for no reason. So, Blake, if you ever watch this video, I think you did a pretty good job. El Mañana TTC Remix. This remix was recorded by the French group TTC in 2006. The group submitted the remix to be included on D-sides, but it was rejected. Later on, after further review, it was officially approved and was even added to the official promotional tracklist. However, in the time between rejection and approval, the band and the producer had lost the recording of the track. So because there was no track to send to the record label, the remix never ended up on D-sides, and it's never been found. Something Like This Night. Okay, how stupid do I sound saying something? This was a song by Snoop Dogg featuring Gorillaz, and the instrumental sounds very much like Don Chromatic and maybe even Bill Murray, so I don't know if it was sampled from that or taken from another unused Plastic Beach demo. There's also a female voice singing along with 2D who's credited as Noodle when you look up the lyrics, but I don't think it is, so I don't know what's up with that. 2D's Multiple Children. This is something that I feel like is talked about a lot, but at the same time, I don't think it's talked about enough. So on the Phase 2 Kong Studios website, you could find this email addressed to 2D, revealing the fact that he has multiple children with multiple different women. I think that this is something really important to note because I feel like it says so much about what his character used to be versus what it is now. I think in the modern day, people kind of tend to baby him and treat him as kind of like a small bean. I don't know if people still say that, but like that's what it is. And I think the writers are also partly to blame for this. And I've just realized that this is not what the entry was supposed to be about, and I've gone off topic. So we're going to course correct and we're going to move on. Sarcasmo. This was a feature of the Plastic Beach website. It was kind of a mini game similar to, what's that guy called? Zoltar, where he like tells you your fortune or something. I don't know. I've never actually played it because he scares me like really bad. Anyways, he would tease an update to the game coming April-ish, which kind of became a joke among Gorillaz fans. If you don't know, like I said, an update to the game would be promised April-ish, but in reality it wouldn't actually happen until April of the following year. And even then, the game was still far from being finished. So April-ish kind of became a joke amongst fans as kind of like an unfulfilled promise or like something that was really never going to happen. You know, like, yeah, I'll get around to it. April-ish. Child support payments? Yeah. I'll get around to it. April-ish. I probably should have done a 2D voice for that bit, but I am simply too cowardly to attempt one. Me White Noise 2D Mix. So Me White Noise is a song that appears on the Blur album Think Tank, and there was an alternate version intended to have been done by 2D. Also, another question for the audience, how many of you guys are Blur fans? Because I feel like other than Damon being part of both, the type of music that Blur and Gorillaz make are not similar at all, so I'm kind of wondering how much of an overlap there is. Also, are any of you guys fans of The Good, the Bad, and the Queen? Please be fans of The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, please. Rise of the Ogre library card. So an early edition of Rise of the Ogre that was sold at a pop-up shop contained a library checkout card with the names of various real and fictional people. Outsiders. This is a fan-made album covering literally everything outside of the main studio albums. It's 612 tracks and it covers phases 1 through 5. History to Date EPK. This was a DVD composed of all of the interviews and music videos made for Gorillaz at that point in time. It was only for promotion, but I personally think it would be kind of cool if they released one of these 4 fans at the end of each phase as kind of like a summary of what had happened. It would definitely make the lore a lot more digestible, but let's be serious, we all know modern Gorillaz doesn't care about lore. Actually, that's not entirely fair. I think the Cracker Island world has been pretty good, although again, it suffers from a lot of missed potential, and I'm getting off topic again. Damn it! Exhumation. This was the original version of Left Hand Suzuki Method. It's much longer, but the lyrics are the same. That's it. Original Dirty Harry storyboard. So in the album booklet for D-Sides, you can see some images that were meant to be a part of the storyboard for Dirty Harry, but never made it there. The album booklet for D-Sides is actually very fascinating. It contains a bunch of Jamie's sketches from Phase 2 and kind of his ideas that never saw the light of day, a lot of which are pretty cool. Last Living Souls Touche remix. This was an unreleased remix of Last Living Souls. I'm trying to think if there's anything I can say to make this more interesting, but that's kind of all I got for this one. Jarhead Helmet. In conjunction with the movie Jarhead, which I've never heard of before today, Gorillaz put a helmet featuring some of Jamie's artwork up for auction for the charity War Child, which provides support to children living in war-torn areas. This wasn't the only time they worked with War Child, because Hong Kong was actually originally written for their album Help, A Day in the Life. Alright guys, I got some big news! We finally arrived at layer 6, the very last layer of this iceberg. Before we get started, I want to stop and say something that I probably should have said, like at the very beginning of part 1. This particular iceberg is categorized by how obscure the entries are, rather than how disturbing. I mean, obviously, otherwise the Murdoch tape would be at the very bottom, because that one kept me up all night. Because it was so scary. What did you think I meant? So basically, the way that this iceberg works is that the most common knowledge things about the topic will be at the very top, and then the most least known things will be at the very bottom. So this very final layer is going to contain a lot of obscure things that maybe a lot of people don't know about, rather than things that are going to be more graphic or disturbing, the way it is with some icebergs. Just wanted to let you guys know before we get into it. And the very first entry of the very last layer of the iceberg is Monkey Live Jules Holland. This refers to a live performance on Later with Jules Holland, in which 2 songs from Monkey Journey to the West were played with Damon on bass. Converse Launch Party 7-inch. So at an official launch party to promote the Gorillaz collaboration with Converse back in 2012, these 7-inch discs were included in a gift bag. The strange thing about it is that, from what I could find, there was absolutely nothing on them. Jubilee. This was a song by Bobby Womack on his album The Bravest Man in the Universe that was produced by Damon, and it's going to come up in a later entry, so just keep it in mind. Jubilee by Bobby Womack. Smooth Jazz. This was a tribute CD of smooth jazz covers of Gorillaz' biggest hits, as well as some smaller ones like All Alone and Every Planet We Reach Is Dead. I remember finding this a while ago and being very confused. Reject False Icons post-credit scene. So in case you don't remember, Reject False Icons was a documentary released in 2019 showing the process of making and touring both the albums Humans and the Now Now. Now there was a post-credit scene that was only shown in cinemas. Remember, the movie was only shown in cinemas for one night, so not a lot of people saw this scene. It's mostly just clips of live shows, so I'm not really understanding why it was put there, considering that's just kind of what the documentary was in the first place. Also, it is like so fucked up to me that in the credits they had like this long list of like thank yous. Yeah, in case you don't know, they had a long list of thank yous for like literally everybody who's ever worked with Gorillaz in any capacity, except Cass Brown. Like, they didn't even mention him. Like, what the hell, guys? Inca GeoCities page. So Inca, the ink-based girl, was an extremely minor character in Gorillaz lore. Literally the only way you could see her was to go on the Kong Studios website and then click on a GeoCities page that was bookmarked on Murdoch's laptop. And in case you're, I guess, too young to remember GeoCities, it was a website creator by Yahoo, kind of like a Weebly situation where you could set up your own web page. Anyways, Inca, the ink-based girl, or just Inca, was a groupie of the band who sent Murdoch photos. Serpico. So Serpico, I believe that's how you pronounce it, is a musician, and it's very hard to find information on them because they like to maintain a deliberately mysterious persona, but their song Smoke Break features a video directed by Denholm Hewlett, who is Jamie Hewlett's son. And of course, he also directed the documentary I just mentioned, Reject False Icons. Paris Amsterdam Waltz. This was another unreleased song that was featured in the credits of the DVD Slow Boat to Hades. In case you're not familiar, in phases 1 and 2, Gorillaz would release a DVD at the end of each phase, compiling all of the music videos and interviews and just other pieces of Gorillaz-related media. The Phase 1 DVD was called Celebrity Harvest, and the Phase 2 DVD was called Slow Boat to Hades. Keep those two DVDs in mind because just like Jubilee, the Bobby Womack song I mentioned earlier, Slow Boat to Hades and Celebrity Harvest will be coming back later on. 5-pointed star. So you've probably noticed this tattoo of Damon's, a 5-pointed star. Damon wrote a play called Dr. Dee in 2012, which detailed the life of Dr. Dee, a 1500s astronomer, astrologer, alchemist. He was a really genuinely interesting person. He could probably be a whole iceberg on his own. Anyways, he invented this 5-pointed star and used it to communicate with extraterrestrials, allegedly. And as a result, this 5-pointed star appears throughout a lot of Damon's work. Slingbaum 1. I don't know if it's pronounced Slingbaum or Slingbaum, but I'm going to say Slingbaum because I feel like that's more fun. Terry Slingbaum is a musician as well as a ghostwriter for a lot of other famous musicians. He recently put out an album, Slingbaum 1, which is only 3 songs, yet somehow manages to have 38 featured artists. And they're big names too, like FKA Twigs, Questlove, Erykah Badu. From what I've heard, he did this because he wanted to sort of elevate black voices through his music. Which doesn't really explain why Damon features on the 3rd song. Yeah, that's why this entry's on the iceberg, is because Damon features on the 3rd song. And not a lot of people know about it, I guess. Probably because the album is only available on vinyl, which is like $50, which I think is kind of a dumb thing to do. It kind of makes the album less accessible. And wouldn't you want your music to be accessible to everybody? I don't know. Gap advertisement. So I'm just going to take this quote directly from an interview with Jamie in 2006. The question was, what were some of the more ridiculous ideas pitched to you in the context of Gorillaz brand deals? And this was his answer. Armani wanted to do a fashion campaign with 2D, and The Gap wanted to use footage of an old Audrey Hepburn film with Noodle doing a dance to it. They wanted to pay us mounds of cash to do the latter. I kind of thought the Audrey Hepburn thing was cool, but I couldn't bring myself to do a Gap advert. It just makes the whole thing seem like shit, really. X-Sides. This was another fan-made collection of all of Gorillaz' unreleased songs, demos, and features on other songs. Demon Chaser. So this was meant to be a part of Gorillaz' collab with Jaguar back in Phase 4. It was supposed to be an iOS game where you could design your own car and then race with other players. And they even set up a competition where 20 winners would compete on stage at Demon Days, I assume to win a prize of some kind. But of course, this competition was cancelled because the game was cancelled and it never happened. Gorillaz Surfboard. So back in Phase 3, they set up a scavenger hunt on their website, and the winner, who would be announced by Murdoch on Twitter, won a surfboard. I have no idea where this surfboard is now. Shit can happen. This is a song by D12, who you probably know collaborated with Gorillaz on the song 911, but as far as I can tell, nobody from Gorillaz was involved with this particular song, so I'm not sure why it's on the iceberg. Adulteress's Punishment. This was a song used in the DVD intros for both Celebrity Takedown and Slow Boat to Hades. See, I told you it was coming back. Now, you would think that this is just another unreleased Gorillaz song, and it kind of is, but it's actually a cover of the song Adulteress's Punishment from the original soundtrack to the movie Cannibal Holocaust. And I've mentioned this video before on my channel, and I think one day I probably will make a full-length video on it because that movie, it sure is a movie. I will tell you that. And in the meantime, I would definitely recommend you watch Mr. GG's video on it because I think he breaks just the whole mess down really well. Anyways, you can probably tell I don't feel very positively about this movie, but Jamie does because it's one of his favorites, which is why I assume he used this homage in these DVDs. Red Pepper. So in the G Bite Jump the Gut, Del was voiced by not Del, but a voice actor named Red Pepper who's known for his work in movie trailers. 2D fake / Russell real. Okay, I really don't love how often because are cropping up in this video. This was kind of hard to find information on, even though I have sort of a vague memory of it happening. So if you look at this tweet posted by the official Gorillaz account, you'll see a comment under it that says something along the lines of, "I see you cropped out the swastika that was on Russell's jacket." So I couldn't actually find the original image like anywhere, even though I recognize this Phase 4 art. I remember seeing it before, and I don't really know what the title of the entry is referring to in regards to 2D, but I think this entry is referring to this tweet with Russell in which his jacket supposedly had a spot on it that was cropped out. PRPS. PRPS is a Japanese denim brand that Gorillaz collaborated with in the spring of 2006. Unlike other Gorillaz brand deals like Red Bull or Levi's, this wasn't an actual product that was sold, but simply a collection of promotional images that were released. Fingerprints of the Gods. This is a song by DJ Skits that features both 5 Live Cypher and Roots Manuva, who have both collaborated with Gorillaz. 2D / Murdoch handkerchief. So, in this specific artwork from Phase 4, you may notice that 2D has a handkerchief in his pocket, and several fans have noticed that handkerchiefs are used as kind of a code amongst the gay BDSM community, whereas like different colors of handkerchiefs will represent different interests. The bravest man in the universe. So Bobby Womack was actually in retirement before his daughter convinced him to work with Gorillaz on their album Plastic Beach. After his work on Stylo and Clad with Unknowing, he decided to put out one last album before he died called The Bravest Man in the Universe. Adam Gutch. Adam Gutch is this guy from the Superfast Jellyfish video. It seems like he doesn't really want to be recognized for it, and he's mostly moved on to other stuff, which I can respect. Water sports.
No!
Rhythm Whirlpool. Okay, so, again, I think when I was looking at this entry, I had a kind of theory on what it would be. I was thinking, it has the name Whirlpool in the title. Maybe it's another unreleased song from the Plastic Beach era, but that's weird. I've never heard of a song called Rhythm Whirlpool, and I think I'm pretty familiar with Gorillaz' entire catalog, right? So I Googled it on a public browser, and I found out that it is not, in fact, an unreleased Gorillaz song, but it is, it's kind of like, okay, it's an account on Twitter that draws porn of 2D and Noodle, and I've said it, and we can just move on, next entry, acetates. So for those of you who don't know, an acetate is kind of like a test version of a vinyl record, and a lot of rare Gorillaz songs can be found exclusively on these acetates. Toy laser gun credit. This is a fun one. So on the Gorillaz song Hong Kongaton from D-Sides, you can hear a toy laser gun being played in the background. And if you look on the album credits, Jamie Hewlett is credited as playing the laser gun. This laser gun also came back in Reject False Icons, which is pretty fun. Sick Parrot. Sick Parrot is another unreleased song from Phase 3, which would eventually become the instrumental for the Bobby Womack song Jubilee. See, I told you it was coming back. It makes sense that they reuse some of this old Plastic Beach content because there's just so much of it. Like, there was 2 hours of music that just never saw the light of day, so it absolutely makes sense that he would have repurposed it for other collaborators. D-Side / Demon Days Fights. So again, I kind of had my own conception of what this entry was going to be before going into it. I thought it would be kind of a situation where Jamie and Damon were fighting over which tracks to include on Demon Days versus D-sides, kind of like how that in that one scene in Reject False Icons you could see them fighting over whether or not to include 1% on the Now Now, but apparently that's not it, because when I tried looking into it, I was just directed back to this very Iceberg post on Reddit, and this is what somebody in the comments had to say about it. Demon Days wasn't entirely liked by the fandom when it came out. No dub, not like self-titled, so when D-sides came back, there were forum 16 on Tiptoes. Okay, I don't know if you guys can hear, but there are like all kinds of sirens going on behind me. I guess that's actually kind of funny timing. I'm recording this in a parking lot, don't worry about it. So this entry comes from a Facebook chat with Murdoch in which a fan asked him, "How young will you go?" And his answer was 16 on Tiptoes. Geep car owners. So if you didn't know, yes, there is a real Geep. It was featured in the mockumentary Charts of Darkness, and then after that a competition was set up in which the winner got to take home the Geep. So what had happened was a man named Fade, aka Martin Tower, actually cheated to win the competition using an auto-enrollment service. After he won the Geep, he sold it on eBay to a man named Ralph Voland in 2005, and since then, nobody really knows where it is. Snakes and Ladders remix. So I previously mentioned the song Snakes and Ladders, but what I didn't mention is that it was supposed to be remixed by Space Monkeys on one of their upcoming albums, which means this remix is an unreleased remix of an unreleased song on an unreleased album. The Foster Clan. Can I say cock? I'm going to be so honest, I don't understand these YouTube guidelines at all. So I mentioned the album Deltron 3030 by Del in the previous part of this iceberg, but what I didn't mention is that in addition to featuring on the album, Damon was actually the narrator of the album, and Del gave him a character just like Gorillaz gave Del a character when he worked with them. Damon was Sir Damien Thorne VII of the Foster Clan. Okay, I'm really hoping you guys can't hear it, but there's literally a helicopter like circling above my head. Stanley Huang. So Space Monkeys were actually supposed to have their own theme song that would be part of a commercial that never got made, and this theme song featured a rap in Mandarin by Stanley Huang. He also performed Clint Eastwood with Gorillaz at the Golden Melody Awards in Taiwan. Lost Curtis tracks. So Curtis Lynch Jr. is a producer who produced the Gorillaz song Dracula and also made a remix of Slow Country. He made 2 additional tracks with Gorillaz, but they're missing. Koala never got paid. So Kid Koala did the turntables and scratching on the first Gorillaz album, and in a 2020 interview he said, quote, "I still haven't been paid for my work on Gorillaz, which is fine. I actually did it because at the time, Dan saw I was on tour in London, Dan being Dan the Automator, and he called and said, 'Hey, you're in London. Come by this studio. I'm working on this thing with Damon Albarn, and if you do some scratches on this record, he'll introduce you to Bjork.'" So the only reason he worked with Gorillaz is to get with Bjork. Honestly, that's fair enough. Stylo car owners. So in addition to the Geep, there is a real Stylo car, although the whereabouts of this one are much more well known. The car used in the music video belongs to Jacob Klug from Denmark, and he has an Instagram account dedicated to the car. Sometimes he'll bring it to Gorillaz related events like Demon Days or something like that. Levi Wash Info. So this was a part of the Gorillaz collab with Levi's. I don't know if it was included on the physical product, but I found this sticker on a website for a branding studio who works with Levi's. It's washing instructions for the denim, or whatever their merch was. I actually think it was like sweatshirts or something. The top half is blocked by the Gorillaz logo, but the rest of it says, "But if you're going to insist, keep it cool, 30 degrees will do it. Don't even think about bleaching it, terrible idea. And forget about fabric softener. Who are you, 2D? Finally, don't whack it in the tumble dryer and turn it inside out before you put it in the hole. Got it? Yeah, guys, turn it inside out before you put it in the hole. I'm always trying to tell people that. And finally, we have the very last entry on this entire iceberg, Murdoch Discord interview. I want to preface this entry with saying that I know absolutely fucking nothing about Discord, but I was under the impression that the Gorillaz Discord was fairly new. Like, I only think it came around, like, maybe a few months ago. And then I found a I was able to find a welcome message that Murdoch gave for joining the Discord, but I couldn't find an interview. Was it maybe like an unofficial Gorillaz Discord that set up an interview with Murdoch? I don't know. Honestly, I feel like the takeaway from this entry and all 4 of these Iceberg videos, honestly, is that I am just not that smart. And that's okay. And we are finally done with the entire Gorillaz Iceberg. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who watched even just one of these videos. I know it's been a long journey, so thank you, especially to the people who have stuck with me all the way through. I mentioned at the very, very beginning of the series that I made this video, or all of these videos, because I love watching Iceberg videos on YouTube, and after this experience I have so much more respect for Iceberg creators on YouTube, because the amount of work and research that goes into it is frankly insane, and I honestly don't think I'll be making another Iceberg for a very long time. But I will be making more Gorillaz content, so if you liked it, be sure to stick around.